Hey everyone, it's Corey of Blue Falcon Board Gaming. If you're new to the channel, I'm a United States Marine Corps veteran that started the Blue Falcon Board Gaming Group in the Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia tri-state area with the hopes of promoting positive mental health through board games, as well as making board games more accessible to the community by hosting and co-hosting free events. Today, I have Mark Wilson with me. He has a Kickstarter project going on right now. So we're going to learn about him, learn about his project. So Mark, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Corey. It's been nice.
Absolutely. So who's Mark? Who's Mark outside of board games? What's a typical day look like for you? Where are you from? All of that stuff.
I professionally am a 3D artist in the video game industry. Let's divert that a little bit. And I'm currently with a company called Super League that works in the Roblox game engine. Most of my professional work has been through 3D art, 3D character art. But going forward, I wanted to sort of widen my umbrella and my scope of work. So I've been playing board games for over a decade now, and I got into the hobby probably around 2012, 2011. And at some point about 2.5 years ago, I said, "Hey, I want to make my own deck building game." Excuse me. It's been like my favorite subgenre in all board games. So I started doing that, and went from 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper taped together to make a board to now being on Kickstarter, currently live.
Awesome. So yeah, you said you got in about a decade ago. What was your kind of introduction into the hobby? Maybe more specifically, like the modern board games.
Yeah, we're not going to refer to the Bedrock or like Game of Life or Monopoly. I was actually at a convention and I saw the very first board game that I bought in that scope, Ascension Storm of Souls. It was the third expansion, designed by Justin Gary. I actually got to meet him this last Gen Con like a few months ago. It was like meeting a game design idol. But when I started playing Storm of Souls, I really got into the board game hobby. So over time, I started expanding my shelf and buying more deck building games. And now I have a big shelf in my dining room full of board games. A good portion of them are Ascension. I was a bit of a fanboy for Justin when it came to his projects. But over time, I've been expanding off of those.
So if you like
Hey!
deck builders,
Oh, I never even seen this one.
so it is an Insane Clown Posse deck builder.
I didn't
And
know that there was another musician. I saw the Guar deck builder game recently.
yeah, so this one's been out for a while now. Let's see if it's got a date on it. I'm not seeing a date right away. I feel like it's older though. Surprisingly, I prefer this to the base Ascension.
Really? I'll have to look into it. I hadn't
Yes.
heard about that.
So, yeah, it's actually a very solid game. Obviously, I think a lot of people that would see it would be turned off by it just because of the IP and everything. But it's actually Insane Clown Posse's like record label that produces it and everything. But it is surprisingly a mechanically sound deck builder.
Oh. It said Echo Side, that's the title?
Into the Echo side.
Into the Echo Side. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into
Yep.
that. Let me jot a note of that down.
Yeah, it's on their record label website. It is Psychopathic Records. So, but I picked it up as a joke. I'm like, whatever. It's like 40, 45 bucks. Even if it's terrible, it's still something funny. It's actually, I prefer it over Ascension, or at least the base version of Ascension.
Gotcha.
Which really,
Over time, Justin added more mechanics to each set.
yeah,
And I certainly have my favorites, and I certainly have my least favorites.
yeah. I love playing on the app. The app version of Ascension is so easy to do. You can knock out so many games of it. Yeah. So what made you want to design a game? What was that kind of transition from going from hobbyist to designer?
So, going back to the deck building genre, I noticed I started seeing patterns in design that to me were there were kind of like problems, but to other players they might not seem like problems. Uh, there was two questions I wanted to ask myself as I was designing City of Myrkesh. How do I make every strategy the game has to offer available at all times? And how do I remove the side market? So, for example, with the first question, if a player really enjoys playing strategy A and the market of 5 to 6 cards, 5 of your Star Realms and 6 of your everyone else, if it only has strategy B and C, you're really locked into those two strategies and you can't really fully express yourself with strategy A. So my take on that is my deck building game is divided into or is created in a city, and that city is divided into 5 different districts, 5 different strategies to win the game. And in each of those districts is a deck of 16 cards, and that deck is going to have 2 cards out at a time. So for every strategy, you're always going to have 2 cards, and in total have a 10-card market. And it depends on where the player is positioned on the board to determine what cards they have access to. My second question solution was you typically, when you see like a side market, like Explorers and Star Realms or the Mystics and Heavy Infantry and Cultists and Ascension, those cards are typically there for if like the market is super expensive at the start of the game and you can't afford anything, you invest in those side cards to build up your buy power or fight power. Or if there's no monsters out in the market, then you go and attack the dummy monster they have, and you do that as many times as you can until a monster comes out. What I did is I implemented a cost curve in each deck. Of each district, there's 16 cards, and there's a good amount of 1s, plenty of 2s, plenty of 3s, a few 4s, 1 5, and 1 6. So the cost curve dictates that more likely that cheaper cards are going to come out. So with 5 of these 16 card decks being shuffled, there's most likely going to have a district where players can afford cards at the start of the game instead of having to invest in those stockpile cards from the side.
Gotcha. So yeah, let me. I'm going to try to do a screen share here of the Kickstarter. I haven't done a screen share while recording before, so we're going to see how this works out.
Ah, there we go.
There we go. All right. So this is the Kickstarter page,
Mm-hmm.
and it is City of Myrkesh. So how did you come up with kind of that world building? What was the inspiration behind Myrkesh, and where did that come from?
I wanted to have a mixture of like fantasy and steampunk. Just from a tabletop gaming background, I've played a ton of the War Machine tabletop game from Privateer Press, and I really enjoyed the world building that game had created. In a combination with, as you can see the posters behind me, I'm a bit of a Magic player, and I have a ton of art books from Magic's different planes, and I just love the world building that the people behind that vision can create. So I wanted to build the universe of City of Myrkesh with all the card illustrations from all the artists, and also exemplify that steampunk and fantasy vibe to it. Within these districts, there are common characteristics. If you're from Merchant's Row, you're going to be someone who's selling something, or a pirate, or maybe one of the witch merchants. If you're from Industrial Grounds, you're going to vibe with the automata, the artificers, the marvels of machinery from that district. Yeah, I see you pulled it up right there. Royal Courts is going to be your aristocrats and your knights and your royalty. And if you could scroll up, I think the other ones are towards the top. Yep. If you're from Wilds, that's your shamans, your savage folk, your dryads, your monster hunters. In the case of the hummingbird, is the box art or the cover art for it. And if you're from Undercity, that's going to be the flesh cult, revolutionaries, ghosts and ghouls, more spooky stuff.
Okay. And does each faction have its own little special ability that they lean toward?
Glad you asked. Yes, they have a specific strategy depending on which one you play. So we can go from top to bottom or bottom to top as I explain it. So for Merchant's Row, here, let's pop in Wilds. Wilds is all about generating power. I have the faction icon, and then next to it I have the thing they focus on. So Wilds is all about generating power. There's dead cards that go in your deck when you fight the monster called Wounds, and they allow you to cycle through your wounds faster. And sometimes the game prevents you from attacking with rubble. The monster will destroy the city and make certain points of access from attacking it untenable. So you're able to ignore that with Wilds. Undercity is very much movement based. In my game, you can take any card, play it either vertically or horizontally. Vertically gets you the normal card. Horizontally just prevents all the text on the card but gets you a movement. Undercity doesn't need to do that. They are full of movement shenanigans. They can be moving around the board wherever they want. Also, they're a bit sneaky, so they will also want to steal points from their opponents or steal cards from their opponents and slow them down. They have an ability called Dagger Slash that gives them a slow status. Merchant's Row is all about money generation. If you want to get a ton of coins to buy the more expensive cards, if you want to get bonuses from buying cards in certain areas, Maybe you want to rush cards by when you buy them. You normally put them in your discard pile, but rushing them means you put them on the top of your deck. And they also allow you to broaden your card selection. Normally, you're limited to wherever your player piece is at on the board is what cards you can buy from, but you can buy from other players' pieces as well. Industrial Grounds, I have a spot for. They were the trickiest district to balance. They're all about card draw. So if you want to be the player who cycles through their deck super fast and draws all the valuable cards that you bought, or if you want to play cards that have different modes, like choose A or B, and depending on what situation you're in, maybe B is better or maybe A is better, that's Industrial Grounds. And then the final one, Royal Courts, is a bit of a mix of Merchant's Row and Wilds. They generate coin, they generate power, they'll do both. They'll also prevent players from disrupting you. They have the shield mechanic, and they also toss taxes out to players to allow you to slow down their coin generation. And they're the only district in the city that can get victory points besides hitting the monster. Normally, you hit the monster to get prestige, and there's this big pool. And once this pool runs out, the game's over. But they can get noble prestige, so just because of their background and everything, they can just accrue victory points by doing other stuff.
So let's see what else we got here. So what's the big monster in the middle?
So I had plans to make multiple monsters. This is the first one. This is the Death Stitched Hydra. I also posted some painting. Some of my one talented friend Justice painted one of the test prints we had. But you'll notice that the monster sits on a pentagon base, and that refers to the monster having 5 different sides to attack. In this case, the monster has 3 heads. So the front arc of the monster is the Inferno Maw, the Plague Maw, and the Void Maw. And then behind it is what I call the Thick Flesh, which you can hit, and it's better to hit it in the back versus the front, since the negatives will be less severe than hitting it from the front. This is the first monster, but I would love to work on future ones with different mechanics as we go on.
So how does the monster interact? Does it have its own kind of like deck that you draw from whenever you hit it, that it tells you what happens, or is there a set mechanic that will always happen when you hit it?
So the monster is more of like an HP pool. When you start the game, you have a pool of prestige, and when that's the monster's health. So in a normal game, you would have 12 points per player. So in a 3-player game, you'd have 36 health on the monster. When you attack the monster, you use all of the power you have access to. Maybe the player has 2 power, and they want to convert their power into victory points. They'll attack the monster, get some prestige, what I call the victory points, and then the monster will react to you depending on how much damage you deal to it. If you hit the monster hard enough, maybe you can ignore the wounds that it deals you, but if you don't meet that threshold, it's going to deal you wound cards, which act like dead cards, and they'll go through your deck and clog your engine a little bit. The monster might change facing depending on who's attacking it, so the monster is constantly rotating around this board, and it's different sides and facing different districts. And the monster, if you hit it to a certain degree, will create rubble, which will be these little tokens that are on the board. And those rubble tokens will interact with you attacking or purchasing cards that prevent you from attacking. And they'll make the cards you're trying to purchase cost an additional speed, since you got to crawl over the rubble to recruit an ally. And this is just the first one. The next monster I work on, I plan to have different like wound effects and negatives depending on what side you attack.
Okay. And then what is the intellect hoarder?
This is the work in progress shot of the second monster that I've been working on. I've still got to name the sides. You can see the base doesn't have any extruded letters at this point, but this is the plan that I have to create the second monster, and it's part of one of our reward tiers that when the campaign is over, we will be giving away STL files of this monster, and if you'd like to print it, you can print it from anyone you know who has a 3D printer, and you can try out the monster. It's kind of like a 3D print and play.
That's really cool, because we were just talking, me and one of my buddies the other day, we were doing an event, and he's got a 3D printer, and we were talking about, like, we don't understand why publishers don't just drop STL files into the rule book to where you can print your insert. Like, I get that it's expensive to make inserts and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
but you could just you could drop an STL file in the rule book, and if someone has access to a 3D printer, they could do that. If you don't have access, it still allows the second market, for people that do have access to it that are selling them and everything. It still allows them to print it and ship it off and all of that. So I like the STL files for the miniatures. That's a really good idea, especially for future expansions too. If there's no cards involved coming into the game, you could just do it like, hey, here's a five monster expansion pack. STL files are $20 or whatever,
Yeah, because when we go from the base reward tier of $55 to 70, it's only like a $15 difference. So that just includes the extra monster files in the STL. The monster is both a miniature and like a punchboard token asset that will just explain like, oh, if you hit it in the front, or you hit it from the left, or you hit it from the right, this stuff happens.
Very nice. So it's active right now. So today is November 1st when we're recording this. How long is the campaign open for?
It started October 24th and goes until November 24th.
Awesome. And let's see, it looks like your goal was 10,000 and right now you're at 5840. So you're over halfway there with still 21 days to go. So
yeah.
You were tracking very well. All right. Yeah, I saw this. Like I was telling you before we started, I was going to reach out to you because this one's really caught my attention. Because whenever the first game that I started like tinkering with, and I'm like, oh, I could design a game. It reminds me very much of that because I wanted to have interlocking, like an interlocking board to where it could be variable setup, but you had to move around to be able to access those cards. So instead of having the 5 card or 6 cards in the middle that you have access to anywhere, if you're in spot A, then you have access to the spot left of it, right on A, and to the right of it. And that was from Helsinki, from Queen Games that I got that idea. But I was wanting to mess around with the deck builder and stuff. So as soon as I saw the circular board and the movement, I was like, oh man, this is going to be right up my alley.
There was
I couldn't do it. Like I messed around with it for a little bit and I'm like, there's no way I can do this deck builder and figure out the balance of it and to make multiple strategies and make sure that one's not just overpowered. I'm like, I would just mess this up so much, but that was the initial idea that I had.
I can't tell you how much balancing I did for this game. I had some very generous playtesters who we'd like meet up once every 2 weeks or once every week and just playtest the game in the update I was in. And of all the districts to balance, the trickiest one was industrial, because that's all card draw. So it doesn't have built-in value. Its value is what other cards are in your deck. So I'm trying to evaluate what draw a card is on a curve. And if you draw like your best card of the deck, that's pretty above the curve. But if you draw the worst card in your deck, like a peasant, very below the curve. So just going into that probability space and figuring out, okay, this is a 3-cost card in industrial. How many cards is it going to draw you? Or is there a condition to that card draw? Different ways to balance it. So its average is mostly on the curve, sometimes above, sometimes below, but not too much.
This is the first game that you've kind of designed and then brought to Kickstarter. What challenges have you encountered that you didn't initially even think of? Has there been anything that's popped up to where you're like, oh man, I didn't even realize that this was a thing?
I was fortunate that I'm co-publishing this game with Dragonhead Games. I've been working with Max for the last year and a half, and he's been really helpful in the process. He kind of incubates board game projects, and he had 4 projects he was incubating this year, and I was his Q4 project. So we've been building this up for the last year and a half. And there is a small detail about my game that realistically I probably shouldn't have done as my first project, but I wanted the game to have a really high replayability factor. So in every district, the 16 cards, there are no duplicates. Every card is unique. So that required me to reach out to like 11 different artists and commission 70 illustrations in the span of 8 months. So getting that and communicating with everyone and making sure it's all on time before we start running advertisements, so then we can then use the set art assets in our advertisements, was really tricky to coordinate all that stuff together, just being myself and Max taking care of the advertising end.
Yeah, the one that I'm working on right now, I didn't realize that a artist and a graphic designer is not always the same thing.
I
Like
work.
going into this, I was like, oh, I could just get one person and be done. And then I started looking around. I was like, oh, that's not always the case. Luckily, Hannah, she's doing my art and everything for me, but she's also graphic design, so she's able to do the card layouts for me. She's been doing some ads and all of that for the Board Game Design Lab. I'm doing a sponsorship for one of their episodes in the coming week and everything. But yeah, like starting out, I was like, oh, artist, graphic designer, those are like interchangeable words. Nope.
I worked with 2 graphic designers for my project. The initial one where he designed all the card frames, so each district had a specific aesthetic for their card frame. And then in the later on, I wanted to redesign my symbols for like coin, power, speed, prestige, because they were pretty generic. I was mostly just using like basic shapes. And the second graphic designer overhauled my symbols so much, and they look so much nicer and so much more like official for a board game.
So, since you're on here, we've got Family Feud Fast Money.
Oh,
Jason from the champion faction is the current champion with 311 points. So we'll see if Mark here can beat 311. So I'm not going to throw a timer up. Just act like you've got 20 seconds to answer 5 questions here. So name something that you might think about getting rid of because it's starting to make a lot of noise.
pets, animals in the wall. No, not cicadas is too specific. Something to get rid of that makes too much noise. Children.
Okay. Name something you have to buy almost once a week.
Once a week. That's tricky. I go shopping every 2 weeks. I'm not sure what the once a week thing is. A loaf of bread.
Okay. Name something people rub for luck.
A 4-leaf clover.
Okay. Name something that rhymes with stakeout.
You said stakeout.
Yep.
Fake out.
Okay. And then name a phrase that begins with hold your.
Hold your horses.
All right. So let's see what we got for points here. Where's my phone at? I gotta get a calculator out. I'm a monkey. All right. So something that you might get rid of because it's starting to make a lot of noise. You had said children. That is not on there.
Okay.
To be fair, though, your first answer of pets, that was number 5 for 6 points. So we'll throw that there since that was your first answer. Number 1 was car.
Oh.
Yeah, I usually just turn my radio up louder. Like, this will fix it.
I can ignore it now.
Yeah. Something you have to buy almost once a week. You had said bread, so we'll count that as milk or food. And that was number 1 for 79 points. Something that people rub for luck. You had said a 4-leaf clover. That's not on there. It was rabbit's foot was number 1, a bald head, a coin or penny, and then a belly, like a Buddha belly.
Okay.
Something that rhymes with stakeout. You had said fake out. That's number 2 at 22 points. And then a phrase that begins with hold your. You said horses, and that was number 1. And that was 37 points. So you ended up with 144.
Oh, I didn't beat the record.
Not too shabby. So talking about balance, I think I need to like preview these cards before I give them, because I don't even know if you got all number 1 answers, if this would even equal up to 311.
Oh. Reevaluating Family Feud.
Yeah, it's 110, it's 150, it's 185. Yeah, no, this maxes out at like 230.
Oh, really?
So I may have to take a look at that in the future.
See what questions equivalent equally, so you can, have a high score metric.
Yeah, because I just randomly pull them out of the box. These are all the ones that we've went through so far. I just keep them in a separate pile. But right. So where can people find you? Yeah. Where can people find you? We got you on Kickstarter. Is there any other social medias though that you want
to? We have a Facebook page for the game called City of Myrkesh Insider. You can check out there. I spoiled half the cards before the Kickstarter launch, and I'm also going to be posting our Kickstarter updates through that Facebook page as well. And yeah, that and the Kickstarter really.
All right. Well, Mark, I appreciate the time, man. I'm definitely looking forward to this. I'm going to go ahead and back it here and everything. Because, like I said,
Yep.
as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, this looks like the ideal that I had, and somebody actually did it.
Well,
I
thank
get to
you.
play it and not have to do it myself.
Who's got the time for that?
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. Got a newborn right now, and
Oh,
I've got 8 hours of sleep. It took me 3 days, but I've got 8 hours of sleep.
props on you running the show and having a kid.
Props on the wife for being able to put up with me and being like, hey, I just need you to watch her for like 30, 35 minutes while I do this. And she's cool with it. I'm very lucky with that.
Matters to have a great partner.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, Mark, I appreciate it, man. And thanks for the time. And everybody go check out City of Myrkesh on Kickstarter right now.
Thanks for having me, Corey.